what they've been rewarded as identifying and what they've been punished as identifying incorrectly. Just like Facebook, with all the different people, we are all just different synapses in the Facebook mind.
Yeah.
And everybody is looking at the same thing, but having different opinions based on what they've been rewarded to see it as, or based on what they've been punished to see it as. So, again, it's basically, I'm a real simple cat. I truly feel there's only one thing going on here. And that one thing has a very distinct and persistent way of being many things. And every time you look at enough many things, they once again congeal to be one thing. And it just goes over and over and over again. Through scale, through time, through expression. So the one thing we all are is the primal energy. A lay-by, this little signature here, represents the primal energy. His signature is usually depicted as the crossroads. So you have negative, positive, and neutral. The Trinity. That is a lay-by signature, and it's the signature of all things. Because there's never been anything more. It's the primal energy. It echoes over and over again, every scale, in every place. To call negative bad is kind of silly.
Yeah, it's misrepresented.
To call positive good is kind of silly. Good and bad only works at this scale we're at. Once you start investigating reality, you recognize that our concepts of good and bad are completely political. They're not real reflections of reality. In other words, we talk about good and bad in order to try to control other people.
Yeah.
In order to try to control our own actions. The inner mind doesn't give a fuck about good or bad. The inner mind only experiences experience. Now you could say it's all bad. I'd rather not. I'd rather say it's all good. If it has to be one thing, it might as well be all good.
It's like there's no good or bad, there's just is.
It just is. However, I feel it's good. The reason why I feel it's good is because, like I was saying last week, at the Big Bang, there was matter and antimatter. Almost in absolute balance. Down to a very small decimal. There was exactly as much antimatter as there was matter. And the two negated themselves out and continue to negate themselves out to this day. What we call the void of space is actually a soup of antimatter and matter particles constantly negating themselves out, constantly breaking into time and space, constantly having a moment of existence, only to meet what they came into time and space for, their soulmate, antimatter, and leave time and space to eternal peace. Time and space exists here. Just a little bit of more matter than antimatter. And that little bit of matter, that very little portion of matter, is responsible for every single thing you can touch or feel. And it isn't very much. In fact, if you were to take all of the human beings in the world and pull all of the space, all of the vacuum out of the atom, so all you have was protons and neutrons and electrons all clumped together in a little clump. We would fit in a ball about this size. Yeah.
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 Because there's more space.
Yeah, when you
There-
think
there-
about the space between the electrons
Yeah,
and neutrons.
Yeah, there's
you're
more
like,
space
there's
between
space
particles
there.
than there are
Everything's
particles.
made of that.
That's true.
It totally blows your mind.
Remember I was talking about souls? I talked about soul skin. Soul skin. Well, kin is, relationship.
Yeah,
So
family.
you can see I have a kinship relationship with people who are in West Africa right now. But regardless of the color of your skin, we're all kin.
Yes.
And we're all African. We're,
Yes.
souls,
Yes.
there's one people, soul, a soul kin. And that soul skin is the whole
Shebang.
spectrum of our skin tones, and they all come out of Africa.
Yeah, if you got melanin, you can't.
Exactly. But the thing is that we are also, because we're matter, we're all about the skin of things. We live on the skin of a planet. The only thing that we want to have anything to do with each other about is each other's skin. Once it gets below the skin, you don't want nothing to do. Bloody gore, I had it. You know what I'm saying? And that atoms themselves have that particular characteristic. Atoms, everything we know about an atom, everything we know about any material is being expressed by the electrons around it. So, those electrons, let's say the nucleus is the size of a baseball. Those electrons are flies 4, 5, 10 miles away. Flies. And those flies are moving so quickly around that ball that another ball coming at it will not hit that ball because the two flies keep the balls separate. All about skin, all about surface. And we talk about the surface as being superficial, but no. The skin runs deep. The skin expresses everything that's within it. When you're looking at that fish, you're looking at the surface of the fish. But something about the surface of the fish is telling you about what's going on in the fish. And it's telling it to you so clearly, you recognize it's going on in you too. You know what I'm saying? So, this idea of skin, this idea of the outer mind, this idea of outward expression becomes divine because it is the expression of what's inside. Right now, we're all about rare earths. Before, 100 years ago, people didn't care about rare earths. It was just dirt. But now we're recognizing that because of the amount of protons and neutrons that exist inside the atom, and then the electrons that are outside the atom, they have kinds of relationships, strange kinds of phenomena that happen. Just because, same amount of electrons on the outside, same configuration of electrons on the outside, but because the protons and neutrons are in a different configuration, the whole atom changes and has different characteristics, particularly magnetic and electrical characteristics. So, basically what I'm trying to get at here is that because everything is one thing, the only way that one thing can contrast itself with another thing is by having characteristics that only that one thing has. Hydrogen has characteristics that only hydrogen has. Otherwise, we wouldn't call it hydrogen. We would have no idea what it was. Because hydrogen has characteristics that are different from oxygen, different from, and again, each one of these characteristics have a birthplace. We know where they come from. Hydrogen comes from the Big Bang. Hydrogen created all the other elements and stars. Those elements all each one of them represents a brand new characteristic, and that characteristic is eternal. That characteristic is information. That characteristic is expressed and provides a contrast that you can then add in new characteristics and new characteristics, and combining characteristics to get new characteristics. Each characteristic has an origin. You know, when we talk about humanity as starting 50,000 years ago, what we're really talking about is the characteristics of a hand with 5 digits, with an opposable thumb, a brain of a certain size. It's all about characteristics. You, as an individual, have very specific characteristics from the moment you're conceived. It's written into your DNA. It's written on a molecular level. And they are specifically your characteristics and your characteristics alone. Unless you have a twin. But even twins, in a very short time, due to epigenetics, due to them working separately on the same signature DNA, they use that DNA differently. So in a very short few years, one twin's DNA is different on an epigenetic level than another twin's DNA. Because they are in 2 different places having 2 different experiences. So even if you start off with the same exact characteristics, just the experience of living in time and space makes you go off on a tangent. And that's a legba. A legba is the road, the path. It's the idea that we can all walk one road together, but it's the idea that no matter how much we walk that one road together, each one of us are walking our own path. You hear what I'm saying? So, Eshu, before they gathers things into balls, a legba, the owner.
Write it down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No. You please feel free. In fact, if anybody has, sorry, that's you. In fact, if anybody has a comment or a question, feel free to interrupt. This little thing underneath the S makes the S pronounced sh, as shu. And then you have a legba.
Is a legba the trickster?
I hate that word, What you gotta understand is that most of the vocabulary that we use around Yoruba culture, it's not only European, it's Christian vocabulary specifically used to dismiss African culture, like Christian vocabulary was specifically used to dismiss Greek culture. The only reason why we call the Greek stories myths instead of parables is because parables were for Christians and myths were for those other people.
Although I would like to give this counterpoint where the trickster was explained to me is a lot of people assume that the devil is a trickster, and there's definitely a judgment of evil and bad, but actually the trickster is neither. They're just the one that comes and shakes things up in a way so that the truth can come to the surface. So,
Is it like Loki in Nordic mythology?
Absolutely, Loki is called the trickster for the same reason I was telling you about.
Well, does it even, like, in a way, does it truly trick you, or does it question? Does it pose a question that is just too deep to truly identify or truly give a right answer? You know?
Well, I tell you, all right. The trickster has always been associated with the devil in Christianity. It is true. But if you read the writings of Christ, you could actually make an argument.
Christ was a trickster. Yes. Yes.
And Christ died on the cross, at the crossroads.
Great.
Oh wow! Dang.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
basically, when the Portuguese came to Nigeria for the first time, they met the guard of the Alafina Oyo, the Emperor of Oyo, and the Emperor's guard all wore iron crosses. And the Portuguese thought these were already Christians. But they were wearing a cross for a leg body. As a matter of fact, if you go and study the cultures of the world, you will find over and over certain archetypes, certain angels, I call them. The reason why I say the word angels is because we're all familiar with the word, but I am not talking about anthropomorphic beings with wings. What I'm talking about are the forces of nature and the identities that come together to build our inner mind. The inner mind has all of these angelic identities in it. So, for instance, when you look at Zeus, Zeus was the Greek. Well, Hermes. Since I'm not talking about it, let me start with Hermes. Hermes or Mercury. Hermes or Mercury is a labor, the messenger. When they talk about something being hermetically sealed, it was to try to keep Hermes from reading all the messages so that he would have all the power and know what everybody was doing all the time. It's a very powerful thing to be the messenger. Like Christ was a messenger. When you look at the devil was supposedly, alright, first off I want to start off with the fact that there is no such concept as the devil in Yoruba culture. And I've never really seen the concept of the devil in any West Central African culture. It may exist, but I haven't seen it. The concept of the devil, as I'm referring to it, is the concept of an angel that is rebelling, is fighting against, has a war with reality.
Or the structure of reality.
Are anything that expresses itself.
Actually, like from the Bible, the proper, let's say, the translation of devil or
Lucifer.
No, it's not Lucifer. It's I think it's something a bit different. But it's if you translate it, it's the opposite. You can translate it as the opposite. So when the
opposition,
the opposite came to tempt me or something.
Okay.
Right.
The opposition, yeah, I can see that. The reason why I say that is because in particularly in Yoruba culture, you have Oludumare, which we spoke about last week. Oludumare means the entire spectrum of time and space. It also means good Lord. The Lord being the owner of time and space, lording to own time and space, and that it is good. The reason why it's good is because there's no opposition to it. It's the only thing going on, only shop going on. Everything is working towards making the good Lord. Nothing is working against making the good Lord. There's no way to be against making the good Lord. Alright? I feel that the devil is deeply entrenched in Genesis. They say that the devil started because he was the closest angel to God, and then God created man, and the devil balked and said, the devil balked and said, "You will not put man before me." God, Jehovah said, I'll do what I want. So the devil went off and rebelled with 1/3 of the heavenly hosts. Again, 1/3 of the heavenly hosts. And Jehovah said, you'll live at the center of the earth in hell. And we'll rule heaven. But, it really becomes about evil, about bad, when humanity is given Eden, and in this course, I will always refer to Sub-Saharan Africa as Eden. That's Sub-Saharan Africa, Eden. It's the origin of man.
The Fertile Crescent.
It's the origin of man. It's the forest we all came out of. Eden had the tree of life. There were 2 trees in Eden. The tree of life, which was all trees. And then the tree of life, which was good. And if you eat of the tree of life, you will live forever. So you had a good tree of life. And then you had the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is good, just like the tree of life is good. You can have the knowledge of good, easy, just by eating the tree of life. What God was saying is that you should not develop the knowledge of evil. The knowledge is something wrong. And what happens? Eve is said to be the one that gets the first illness. Eve's illness.
Oh.
Eve's illness was this idea of knowing something was wrong.
I knew it's her fault.
Well, that's interesting.
I'm kidding.
That's interesting because even before, you see, when I read the Bible, I read it as a parable. It starts off with man. I know the history of the word man in English. I don't know a lot of Hebrew. I don't know how it works out in Hebrew. But I know the history of the word man in English. The word man in English meant humanity. Us as a society. The Edenic society that saw all people as one people. Then you have man, the society of man, saying, we are lonely. We want something other than man. And what does God do? God takes a rib, a minority of the people of man. A minority of the people. I'm not talking sexuality. I'm saying we as a people takes one rib, a minority of the body of man. And that minority is Eve. That minority is Eve. They are different from the rest of man. And they call themselves Eve. Eve has a conversation with a serpent. The serpent is a very specific Orisha. It's Oshun Mara. If you remember Mara from Oludumare, Oludumare is basically saying that reality is a bunch of spaces filled with a bunch of snakes. Those snakes are the quantum forces, the frequencies. So you have time and space, and then you have the endless frequencies that express themselves in time and space. Every frequency is a serpent. So when you look at a rainbow, you're looking at a great serpent showing you a spectrum of frequencies that bind together to make one Mara, to make one serpent. Alright? So Oshun Mara which is the rainbow, the serpent, the frequencies, the spectrum, is in conversation with this smaller group of people. And it's saying to them, well, you know, if it exists, it's going to be a part of you anyway. Eat of the knowledge of evil. This smaller group of people start to eat of this philosophical fruit, this concept of evil. How do they use that? They use it politically to contrast themselves from the people who believe it's all good. They start to have laws and shames. You know, what's the first thing that Eve and Adam does? They cover their genitalia because they're ashamed of it. They start to act differently than the other people of Eden. But the difference is that they feel what they're doing makes them better. And the people who believe in goodness just see it as being something different from them.
Well, I mean, what other people, since they were supposed to be the first two and alone and original?
Yeah, that's my point, is that I'm not talking about an individual or two individuals. I am talking about the body of man. I'm saying that just like the body of the angels had 1/3, had a minority,
Cast down to hell, right?
the body of man had one rib, a minority of people who decided to start using the philosophy of the knowledge of evil. I'm saying that Yoruba, Congo culture, San culture, Ahearn culture, Zulu culture, I'm saying that the cultures of Sub-Saharan Africa were Edenic cultures. They were cultures that believed in the tree of life, and they were the first cultures to spread around the planet, far before Egypt. You know, the Aboriginal culture of Australia, they got there 50,000 years before European expansion. The Aboriginal culture was an Edenic culture. Was a culture that believed only in the tree of life, did not believe in laws, did not believe in police, did not believe that gold was money.
I'm sorry, yeah, it just reminds me of another thing from Bible research. There was, like, before Judaism became a monotheistic religion, it was also a pantheon of gods, and there was this goddess, actually, Asherah, which would be praised under any tree, like every tree. Every tree was her temple, and throughout time she became more less relevant, like erased somehow.
Yeah, she became Lilith. But basically, when you look at early Judaism, I wouldn't say they were polytheistic. What it is I'm talking about characteristics. The reason why there's no altar or song for Olodumare in Yoruba culture is because everything's everything. God's good all the time. There's no distinction. There's no contrast. And then the contrast only happens when you start speaking about specific characteristics. And then you start to get contrast. You get the contrast, like for instance, between Odu, the space in which things happen, and Mara, the things that are moving in that space. You know what I'm saying? And then you have the contrast between the different type of Mara. You know what I'm saying? The knowledge of evil is just another contrast. It's just another characteristic. It's a philosophical characteristic in which you believe that you know what the one good thing is, and you believe that you know what all the bad things is. You know what I'm saying? So I like to talk about a damn man. A damn man was the original society of man. And then there's this 1/3, this minority that said, whoa man, I'm not a damn man. Whoa man, I'm trying to control the damn man. You know what I'm saying? I'm dead serious. And it isn't sexual what I'm talking about. These are all philosophical ideas. You know what I'm saying? And there was good reason for this, you know, because we exist. We are all born out of the conflicts between Edenic culture and post-Edenic culture, the fall. All right, and with the fall, and I also hope that you'll understand that there's a lot of time involved in this stuff. You know, I always think about how rare it is to see animals using tools. You know, very few animals use tools. From the Western European perspective, very few animals use tools because they don't have the smarts to use tools. But I didn't feel that as I was looking at it. I felt that very few animals use tools because they don't see the tool as being dead. Whatever they would use to pick up and do something with, when I look at everything around us, it seems to me that they are only interested in what they're going to eat and what will eat them. And they're only interested in using their body rather than using someone else's body as a tool. You know? So the idea of anything being used as a tool is a moral issue in a sense to me. You know what I'm saying? And I feel that there were these moral issues going all through life. Life is constant. Like for instance, viruses. Viruses started off when we were one-cell animals. Viruses were a little bit of DNA that said, I don't gotta go through the energy of replicating myself. I can just get absorbed into this cell and take over its nucleus. And so therefore, any cell I get into becomes a tool for me to make me. You know what I'm saying? These kinds of moral dilemmas, you see them all through life.
Yes.
You see all the way throughout our development, these arguments as to how would you be, and how would you treat the world around you? There's these moral issues, you know? I mean, when you look at, for instance, the whale, the mighty blue whale, and you look at its history through evolution, look back on its ancestors, it tells an incredible story. It started off as a fish, came up on land eating plants. Then eventually it started to eat other animals like itself. It became a carnivore. It was a horrible, big, wolf-like carnivore that hunted and ate for millions of years. And then it said, nah, I don't like this shit. I'm done with all the killing. I'm gonna go into the ocean here. And then slowly over time, it killed and killed less until it's going through the ocean eating plankton that it can't even see. From its perspective, it's given up eating altogether.
It's a moral
Or maybe it's committing like high genocide though. Because they open up their mouths and like consume in the trillions.
Yeah, but you don't know that though.
No, do they? You know?
As far as I'm concerned,
because every animal has to know their food source.
As far as I'm concerned, I would be eating water.
Well, now they are eating tons of plastic and So I don't know if they like plastic. They
You
go
know,
for plastic.
all I'm trying to say is that when you look at our natural history, when you look at the stories we've been told, when you look at the parables, everything's a parable. And you can see moralistic concepts going back to the very formation of matter. And you can see how different minds, different communities of minds, the insect community has basically thought of everything humanity's thought of way before humanity. The insect community developed cities, they developed farming and animal husbandry, they developed countries and fighting wars. All of this way before mammals even existed. You know what I'm saying? You know? And most of our science is based on really back engineering insects. You know?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, birds, all they wanted to do was get a fly. When they were dinosaurs, all they wanted to do was get a fly. I'm gonna be so fast I can eat a fly. I'm gonna be so fast I can fly. That desire eventually, over millions of years, their body actually developed the engineering knowledge it takes to fly. Just like bumblebees did. You know what I'm saying? I mean, to this day, there are engineers that'll say, I can't mathematically figure out how a bumblebee stays in the air. But somehow their body, that group of cells, working over generation after generation, making this sexual preference, making that sexual preference, making that mistake of dying, making this mistake of surviving, honed that body into a tool that could do this amazing thing. Now, most of the things that we find so amazing around us are all just back engineered nature. You know what I'm saying? You know, and as a result, what I'm trying to share with you is that our inner mind saw all this coming, has done all this, and will continue to do all this. And for what reason? Because time and space is that much against the very character of life. The very character of life, remember I said with the Yoruba, spreading love, spreading desire, the house of spreading love. That's what it literally means. The house of spreading love, the house of spreading desire. And what is the desire? You can see it in every ovum, in every seed, in everything life has ever created. The desire is to grow, reproduce, and spread. Simple as that. That's the reason, that's what got us all here, and that's what we're all working towards. And the earth is just another issue, just another singular point that, just like the supernova, just like the stars that made up all the stuff we're made of, wants to express itself and spread throughout the universe. It's the fundamental issue every single organism has faced. Single cell organisms, I'm sure, was trying to find every way off the planet. I'm sure one of the fundamental reasons we develop multi-cell organisms is so that we can spread to more environments of the planet. And each of those multi-cell organisms all created communities to spread and also try to get off the planet. And here we are, yet another iteration of this eternal contract of DNA. And the only sense we can make of anything is to just get off the planet. We don't even know why. We're perfectly happy here. We should be like, no, we're in heaven. I gotta go someplace else.
Just like every parasite, You know,
Everything.
once the local resources are gone, you have to find a new resource to take from. You know.
But the local resources aren't gone. Local resources will never be gone until the sun explodes, which is so far from now. You know what I'm saying?
But the resources of our planet are
What they
limited.
talk about
That
stuff,
make it
but-
inhabitable for us. See, we're
Correct,
arrogant in
correct.
thinking
Yeah,
that
the
the
planet's
planet's
gonna be
here to
fine.
serve us. The planet will be fine. We're fucked.
For sure, but that is the inherent call of any living organism, is to ensure its next generation, ensure that we don't go extinct.
So what's wrong with us?
Well, I mean,
What's wrong with us? As we think too goddamn much.
there's nothing wrong with us. I mean, here, let's look at the last time the Earth went through a fundamental atmospheric change.
Mm-hmm.
The last time the Earth went through that was because of life.
Mm-hmm.
Single cell life. When the first single cells stopped getting all of their energy and nutrients from the Earth, which is the earliest single cells. The earliest single cells, they didn't need sunlight, they didn't need air. All they needed was the heat of the geofurnaces in the,
Yeah,
in the
geothermal,
ocean
yeah.
and the nutrients that those geofurnaces, and that was all they fed on. That was it, that's all. That's the earliest, as far as according to genetic science, it seems, that was the earliest life.
And we see that still with like the geothermal vents in the ocean.
Yeah, they're
and
still
those-
there. They haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah,
Been
yeah.
there 4 billion years.
Yeah.
Still there. That life gave birth to the next life. The next order of life, well, probably even before that, was the viruses. The viruses started at that time, and other things. But you know, then the next thing was the cells that would use sunlight.
Photosynthesis.
Cells that use photosynthesis.
Yeah, yeah.
And those cells, we all are descended from. Everything that walks the land
Mm-hmm.
is descended from the cells that developed photosynthesis. And when those cells were first existed, when they first came into being, when whatever mutation was necessary, that they started to use sunlight to, the atmosphere of the earth was almost all carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
It was unlivable. If we saw the earth as it was when the first photosynthetic cells were developed, we would look at it like Mars, the dead planet, no reason to go there. But these cells, these photosynthesis cells, started to take that carbon dioxide and use it to make energy for themselves and shit out oxygen. So here you have the first the first life organism to produce a pollution.
It was climate change.
Horrible climate change. The most serious climate change you can imagine.
Yeah.
Completely changed the chemistry of the whole fucking earth.
Yeah.
We haven't even come close to doing the kind of changes that single cell animals did in the first half a billion years of life. Haven't even come close. So, but if those single cell animals had not made those changes, if the earth continued to have the atmosphere it had then, none of us would be here having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So what was their shit? What was their pollution? What was their, this should never have happened. Look, I mean, the ones that were feeding off the, would look at how you're changing the planet. What you doing?
Mm-hmm.
You're shitting all over us. We're all gonna die. You know what I'm saying?
From that perspective.
You know, that's the perspective we're at now with us, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I'm saying? It takes filth in order to make blessings. It takes the muck.
To create life.
It takes the muck and mud to create the beautiful white lotus. I'm not saying there won't be suffering. Suffering is, nobody's going to stop suffering. Suffering is an aspect of time and space itself. That's the reason why we have time and space, so that we can suffer and satiate that suffering. You know what I'm saying? What I am saying though is that there's no reason not to believe that we will either create or somewhere along the line something will develop that will see our microplastics and will see our carbon emissions
Right.
as being absolutely necessary to their existence.
It's true.
That's just the nature of the planet. If you look at the history of the planet, you see over and over again changes that were made either at an atomic level, at a molecular level, at the level of life, changes that were absolutely necessary in order for us to be where we are now. You know?
You see, it's replicated too in nature. You know,
Absolutely.
there's certain animals that have been evolved specifically to ensure the life of certain flora. You know, like the toucan and the hummingbird. The hummingbird has been through generations and generations and generations evolved to have created this beak that can go into the deepest part of a hibiscus. And in that action of taking nutrients from this flower, it has also evolved itself into creating a ship, a Noah's Ark, if you would, of pollination, that this specific creature, this specific life form of flora can only truly be reproduced through that relationship of feeding on energy, creation of energy, and feeding of energy. And it's so intriguing. You know, it's like, what are we feeding?
You see, that's absolutely true. I love the story of the moth that Darwin studied, where he was looking at moths and flowers, and he'd see a flower with a pistil 3 inches long, and he saw that there was a moth with the same exact length of tongue.
Yeah.
And then one day he sees a flower that has a pistil 15 inches long. And he's like, there's a moth, but he knew there had to be a moth like that, otherwise this flower would not be able to reproduce.
Yeah.
So what, he waited around and watched the flower?
He never found that moth.
Oh.
It wasn't until years later that somebody actually found
He was
it.
right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because in order for one to exist, the other has to exist. In order for you to have a flower with that long pistil,
Yeah.
there had to have been a moth that has always used that flower to feed. You know? And that's what I'm trying to say here, is that reality is this type of game. You cannot look at any one thing and think it's in control or being controlled by anything else. Our whole European training is constantly trying to tell us who's the master and who's the slave. Constantly trying to tell us who's the victim and who's the
Assailant.
Perpetrated.
the perp, you know? But the bottom line is that no matter how much of a contrast you bring between the two partners, they're still partners.
Yeah, they can't live without the other.
You see, the Chinese way of talking about Aleba, the owner of the vital force, the owner of the crossroads, is really beautiful. I love their signature for Aleba. It's very different from the African signature here, but it still means very much the same thing.
Yin and yang, okay.
The Tao, the way. Anytime you hear Christ, I am the way, the only way to heaven. Anytime you hear about somebody talking about the way, the road, the path, you're always talking about it. Every time. And every time it's about a simple contrast, black versus white, black versus red. You know, so the Tao is the way the Chinese talked about Aleba. The way in which things happen. Ache is very similar to Chi. Ache is a Yoruba a Yoruba word. Ache. Ache means to make it happen, to make it so. It's talking about the energy that flows through all things, that makes all things happen. And what is that energy? Mare, the serpent. The electrons that make all things happen with us, if the electrons are passing through space, they pass along Mare, they pass along the serpent. If the electrons are caught around a nucleus, then you have the ball, the serpent ball.
So does the serpent represent the wave pattern?
Exactly.
Okay, and everything
Exactly.
that is matter has that
Everything is either a vibration or a pop, a ball of energy moving at light speed.
a wave or a particle.
It's so interesting because, like, you know, the indigenous cultures of the Amazon, the Ayahuasqueros, who have used, you know, the bark of the mimosa hostilis tree to create this like hyper psychedelic commune between humans and the spiritual realm. In the Ayahuasquero culture, the serpent is the carrier of knowledge. It's the carrier. It represents not only knowledge but the DNA in which all knowledge is formed. You know, and I love that, like, that correlation in two different continents, two different time frames.
It doesn't matter which culture you go to around the world, you're going to find these figures. I don't care where you go and study. I don't care who you study. Yes, the holder of knowledge was called the serpent and gave the knowledge of evil, and it's considered bad in Christianity. But knowledge is knowledge.
Knowledge is knowledge, and that's what I grew up extreme Pentecostal, you know, till I was 25, and the serpent was portrayed as, oh, you gave us information, and so you're bad. And information inherently is neither good or bad. It is right in the center.
Nah, I think information is only good. You see,
Well,
how you interpret that information, and then how you use that interpretation to guide your actions
yeah.
is what pushes us to say some information is good and some information is bad.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that through experience and learning, all information becomes good. And we're seeing that right now with AIs.
With what?
Artificial
AIs.
Okay.
intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, at first they wanted to teach the computer's laws, algorithms, to figure things out. But they realized you can't write laws for everything. You can't write, it's so hard to write a law that would help people to understand anything that's going on around them. That's why the whole concept of laws and morality really isn't a very powerful concept. What's a much more powerful concept is the concept of allegories, of parables, of and information you see someplace else. And you can have more and more information about those characteristics. That's when you start to have actual learning. Learning.
Like when I wanted to learn to make guitars, the teacher didn't teach us, this is how you make a guitar. This is how you think about how to make this stuff.
These are the things you want to associate with. You want to think about the length of the string. You want to think about where the resonator is on that length of string. You want to think about how the geometry of sound, the geometry of vibration. You know what I'm saying? And what that really is making associations between different characteristics as you're moving along. And that's what AI is doing right now. AI is constantly making associations between, okay, this nose looks like this on this face, that nose looks like that in that face, that nose looks like that in that face. And over time, it's able to recognize people's faces based on the small differences between the associations. Patterns are really free association at work. Patterns are really seeing the same information over and over again and being able to make that association from one thing to another.
Which is what intelligence is, the
Exactly.
ability to identify patterns. And when we think about the divine intelligent design of the universe, or some people want to call it, it is these patterns that are self-replicating.
Exactly. All right, excellent.
I just want to also, I feel like, what you've been saying has,
This is great, and you guys can stay, I just have to go.
Do you have anything you'd like to share with us before you leave?
yeah.
Well, I just shared it.
Nice to meet you, Steve.
Nice to meet you.
See you around.
No, I gotta run because it's, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, but this, I would stay longer, but I have to be somewhere.
Yeah, believe me, I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also have to think about like timing. It's 8:45,
Oh,
and
wow.
I think we like
Would you like
let's
to
leave some stuff for next week.
Oh,
Right? You wanna like throw a few paragraphs in?
Oh.
Or are you in the flow?
no. I mean, my attitude is that we end when people feel like leaving. You know, if you feel like leaving, we can end now. If you would rather go on a little while, I'd be happy.
I'd
We
rather
can
go
also
on.
have some questions, statements, anything like that. Hey, love that you came through.
Yeah, I'm just sliding in now.
Oh, please sit down. Sure.
I'm sure I missed a lot of context for like,
Well, it's no problem. Get it when you finish. So go on.
Oh, this kind of confirms a thought and observation that I had even really young when I was first introduced to Christianity. And I find it very interesting that even when I was very young, I had a allergic reaction. But one of the things was, so if they're saying to me that God is the Alpha and the Omega and is responsible for creating everything, then doesn't that mean that God is also evil, because evil could not exist if God did not create that evil?
And it's the personal embodiment.
Yes, and in the same way that we in ourselves try to purge out the shadow self, rather than actually deal with it, is how Lucifer or Satan or Beelzebub or whatever name we give the devil, God, instead of dealing with his own evil, purges it. And that's why there's always this constant battle back and forth.
Or maybe he didn't purge it. Maybe, I mean, he gave it to us, right?
Right.
And we're all inherently capable
Of both.
evil deeds,
Right.
as we are capable of holy, for lack of a better word, deeds. But is it that they are both inherently positive or negative, or is it that the mission is to find the unity between them both and find the level?
Right.
You know.
You see, I started this course because I wanted to give culture soldiers.
Culture soldiers?
Yeah, I believe everyone in the room is a culture soldier.
Yeah.
Culture soldier. Let me explain what a culture soldier is. To call Jah, to call Jehovah, or to call God, the soul God, soul Jah, the only God. To call existence the only existence. And one of the key things in what I'm trying to share with you all is something I call soul scope aesthetic. I'm always talking about scopes or spectrums, or these associated frequencies that propagate together and are similar but are characteristically different from each other. I feel that everything that you would call good and divine, to everything you would call mundane, to everything you would call absolute evil, are all one spectrum. That's the scope of your reality. divine, mundane, and absolute evil. I feel it is the artist's job to take that spectrum of reality and make more and more mundane things divine. More and more evil things mundane. And to use your artistry, to use your ability to sway people's minds. I always talk about the fact that presidents and kings and politicians, they make laws telling you what not to do. Whereas artists create a life of expression that tells you what to do. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's much more powerful sharing with people what to do. You have much more effect over society than making laws of what not to do. And one of the, basically, I'm hoping to share with you tools that you will be able to take more and more mundane things and more evil things and be able to sway the viewer to seeing the divinity in the mundane and in the evil. You know, one of the most beautiful things that I feel about Yoruba culture is Chango. When Chango was young in Yoruba land, there was a tradition that twins were evil. And they would either kill one of the twins, or both of the twins, or both twins and the mom. The twins were evil. Chango made this argument that twins were not the expression of some animalist, you know, you're having a whole bunch of kids at one time. You're not an animal. That instead, twins were this representation of a human soul that was so profound, so big.
Couldn't fit into one.
That Obatala couldn't fit that soul, couldn't fit that inner head into one head. He had to make two heads to hold that one soul. Now, this is just a parable, just a story. But as a result of this story, twins went from being something evil, twins went from being something that people killed, to being the pride of the family. The mother went from being shamed to being going out dancing in the street while people threw money at her.
Right, you got 2 for 1.
Because she was giving birth to these powerful spirits that were going to help society.
That's a metaphysical explanation, but the empirical explanation is also eating all those yams gonna give you twins. So somewhere in the middle is what? Wisdom, truth?
All I'm trying to say is that whatever empirical reasoning you give for something, whether that is going to be treated as a negative or a positive, it's because some artist painted it with the bad brush or with the good brush. You get what I'm saying? And us as culture soldiers, it's our job to be able to sway people by what brush we put on something. You know?
Before I said culture soldiers, you were getting on to another point.
Oh, I have no idea. Oh.
No, it is a responsibility, you know, that we have to paint the picture in which the next generation is going to pick up and paint from there, you know. And what legacy in this, you know, figurative painting are we leaving behind? And either way, it's either going to progress or it's going to degress.
Well, I don't like progress and degress either. I'm a strange cat. You see, in order to progress, you have to, which is the reason why Southerners get so upset and believe in creationism, and they say, I'm not descended from no ape.
Yeah.
It's because they think apes are below them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Darwin said, well, we come from apes, but we have progressed, we evolved, we become greater than apes. Now, I just said that insects did everything we're proud of doing, including tool making and husband,
Agriculture.
everything.
Yeah, you guys missed a bit.
But that's good.
Yeah.
Insects did everything we're proud of doing way before we got here. Everything that we say makes us better than all other animals. Insects did that shit way before we got here. So, the whole idea of better or worse is just this big brush. And this idea of progress is another brush. It's made up. It isn't really real. What's really real is the precision and perfection of the reality we all share. A precision that was available to us when we were apes, a precision that was available to us when we were rats, a precision that was available to us when we were fish, and a precision that will be available to us when we become the genetically modified, technically, electronically hybrid beings that we are going to be. You know what I'm saying? It's inevitable. You know, one of the things that used to get on my nerves about Star Trek is that the cat would go everywhere looking for intelligent life. And then once he finds this intelligent life, he's not allowed to interact with it unless they have light speed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all bullshit, man.
Star Trek is friendly fascism anyway.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
The primal energy from which we all come from was intelligent. Absolutely intelligent. More intelligent than us. Because if you were to go back when the primal energy was created the first electron, what size would you say to make an electron? What size would you say to make a proton? But if an electron was just a little bit heavier, or a little bit lighter, none of us would exist.
It's specific.
It is specific, it is precise, it is personal. If your great grandma had turned right instead of left,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, she could have met someone totally different.
You know?
Right.
You know? We are involved in a machine, a precise machine that has been perfect from the start, has never made a mistake, has never gotten better, and can't get worse.
That's so fucking true.
Yeah. And we have to have the thing that we consider evil. It's just always going to be.
Evil becomes part of that goodness, believe me.
It's like the true, the actuality is that there is no plus or negative. There is the constant between the two.
And it's the relationships, it's the
And
context.
it is us as sentient beings who define what is good or bad.
But that's just my thing. I feel everything is sentient beings. You know, monks in the old Christian churches in Europe used to argue about how many angels were on the tip of a pin. No, it's a serious argument. How many angels were on the tip of a pin? Now, scientists today can tell you how many iron atoms there are on the tip of a pin. Those iron atoms, those are angels. Our blood, the hemoglobin in our blood, has two iron molecules, two iron atoms. One iron atom on one side, one iron atom on the other, with the hemoglobin weaving the two iron atoms together. Those two iron atoms are responsible for trapping the air that moves through our lungs and moving that air all around our body. Those are angels. The blood is an angel. Iron is an angel. You know what I'm saying? An angel that has a specific history, has done specific things. just like you would read in history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We've always known these angels on a very real level because of our inner minds. That's the reason why Europeans were making TV sets. That's the reason why here, see this? This is a depiction of the fourth Alafim of the Oyo Empire, Chango. In this image, Chango is holding a gourd with a handle, which he used like a microphone in the 1400s. In the 1400s. But we all had gourds. You can't magnify your voice using a gourd. It's just a fucking gourd. But they believed that this gourd had this ability to multiply your voice. And now today we got microphones.
So you could use it like a cone.
And
It wasn't like a cone.
No, megaphones that
It
are
was
kind of
a
like
ball.
shaped in its image. Too.
No, it wasn't a megaphone. It was a ball with a handle.
Like a
Lord.
talking stick, sort of?
It wasn't a talking stick. It was if you ever seen a checker red.
Yeah.
But in any case, Odu, the Yoruba talent, is binary numbers.
Isn't
was-
that like the, isn't that
It was
like
the
the
Yoruba. It was the Yoruba not the Yoruba, but they actually got from Dugan. But it was West African culture that introduced binary numbers to European culture. You know, we're always told West Africa didn't have any math. That's not true. Our math is what runs today's computers.
Ones and zeros.
And that's my point, is that just to exist, just to express yourself, just to have light hit you and reflect off of you, even if you're dead, you are speaking intelligently. The first language is light. You know what I'm saying? The first language is light. And everything around us speaks it fluently. You know? That's why I get so upset with Captain Kirk. Because you can't go anywhere without finding intelligent life. Intelligent life is the only thing we ever experienced. All right, I can see people pictures.
Thank you.
Next week we're going to start with the angels. And I'm going to start going through them all. We already started a little bit with the leg bow. We're going to get more into the leg bow and then go next week.
And
Yeah.
this concludes.
Wait, let's not totally conclude yet.
Oh.
It's Jill, everyone. First, we're going to talk about what do we have coming up next week, Soul?
The angels, we're going to talk about Alegba and Ogun and Chango, the three angels of the Bata, which, you know, I'll get more into next week.
Great. Okay, next Monday, 6 to 10.
Tune in.
6 to 10.
Come to Grace or watch us online.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have